Welcome back, everybody. Um, Today I was thinking that I'm going to discuss a little something about Canada's history, seeing as that it was Canada Day the other day, and on the news all day yesterday, there was clips about Canada being the greatest country, and what does Canada represent to you in one word? And everyone was love and hope and freedom, democracy, and all that propaganda. Um, and I mean, it makes sense that a Canadian news station on Canada Day is obviously going to big up Canada. I mean, that's no surprise to me. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody else. But I felt that since this is somewhat of an ethical blog website, that I would discuss a dark history of Canada, something that doesn't get discussed much, and something that I have been ironically reading up on in the last few days. A family member lent me some literature on residential schools in Canada, and it just happened to be a few days before Canada Day itself. And then it's funny how it works out that after I'm done reading this literature and looking up on all this work and putting together stuff that I want to put together for a column on this subject, it happens to be Canada Day, and then I see all these good things about Canada, which are true. There are tremendously good things about Canada. There's no denying that. But I'd like to discuss some things that some people might not know, and that is residential schools. Now, if you don't know what that is, at some point in Canada's culture, I think beginning around, I think the first residential school was around the 1860s, so it got really big in the late 1800s and then started to really boom early 1900s. And at some point there was about 200 residential schools all across Canada. And what it was there was this, how do you call it, statement, this thing that they wanted to get out, where it was like eradicate the First Nation, they called it Indian native culture. And I think the mission statement of it was basically, to save the child, we need to get the Indian out of him or her. So it was made up of a few different religions in the country. There was, I think, the Catholic and Protestant were the biggest ones, and then a few other, Anglican and whatever. And they opened up these schools all across pretty much every province. I think it was, at the time, I think it was 7 provinces and 2 territories or something like that. It was all across the country. And they basically set up wherever there was like these reserves and stuff. They set up these residential schools, and they pretty much went in and they took children from all different First Nations cultures and stripped them of their heritage, stripped them of their language, stripped them of their history. beat them, raped them, did a lot of terrible things for many years. And I mean, you can basically call it Canada's version of Holocaust. And you know, it's funny because during the same years that Canadian soldiers are being sent by Britain to Europe to fight Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, the Catholic Church, Protestant Church, Canadian government, knowing damn well what was going on, like, you know, all across the country of Canada, there was a Holocaust going on in our own domestic backyard. And, you know, it's, I mean, I don't want to say it's funny. It's ironic that you have these freedoms that we want to protect, and you know, these ideological morals that we want to protect across seas against a tyrant. And Hitler certainly was a tyrant. But at the same time, there's these atrocities going on in the country that are just absolutely terrible. And I mean, and this goes on all the way to about the early 90s. So I mean, like, basically, like, I'm not very old. I'm 33. So when I was about grade 7, grade 8, this was still going on. I think it stopped around the time, or it started to stop around the time I was in high school. Hasn't really been made a big deal until, you know, recent times in the last few years, where the government's starting to apologize and give some sort of recompense and some sort of money back to kind of try to straighten everything out. But I don't know if that can really straighten everything out. I mean, you know, you can apologize, you can give money, you could shut the schools down, you could make each religion come out and be accountable for their actions and take blame. But I don't really think that's good enough. I think in order to make it right is to educate every Canadian child growing up when they learn Canadian history, to learn about what was going on in their government. Like, I know that, like, in grade 7 and grade 8, I'm in school, I'm in Catholic school, and, you know, we're learning about, like, you know, I remember learning about Nazi Germany and the wrong things that went on over there, and I remember, you know, learning about all kinds of stuff that was going on in the country, and I remember learning about Louis Riel and teaching us Canadian history. But at the same time too, I don't ever remember anything about this ever being mentioned, and it was happening. You know, it was currently happening at that time. And I mean, if you look up on the internet, or you go and look up books and stuff like that, and you look up all the different literature on this subject, it's pretty crazy. They have so many historical accounts of people coming forth and talking about, you know, what was going on in the school. And, you know, I read an account the other day about a kid that was had to put their arms behind their back and put their face in dirt and suck dig for worms, suck up worms with their mouth, and all kinds of small native girls, 12, 13, 14, 15, being raped by priests, and then when they're pregnant, babies are being cut out of their body, discarded, and if they died, then they're discarded too. Like, just treated like animals. If they spoke their native language or tried to preserve their native tongue or any of their heritage, they would be beat nearly to death or even to death. I mean, this is a Holocaust. This is the exact same thing as any type of Holocaust in the history of our world, where a nation is being prevented from being who they are, being driven off land, being completely eradicated, and then taking the youth and exterminating their history entirely. I mean, the greatest Holocaust of all time is what happened in North America to the native people. You know, I remember a few years back when I was in Manitoba, I'd met an older gentleman. Ironically, it was in a holding cell, but he told me that, I think this was around 2007, 2008. He told me, I'm waiting on a check to come in for a residential school. He was getting some apparitions made because, he had come forth, he had told his story, and then a judge had made it said, people were going to get some kind of compensation for what they had suffered over the years. And I didn't really understand the subject, but I remember he was telling me he was waiting on a check. And I was like, well, what are you waiting on a check for? And he goes, oh, because I went to residential school. And I said, well, what's that? Like a nunnery or something? And he goes, yeah. And I'm going to myself, man, you get to get paid because you had to go to a nunnery? Like, I was forced to go to Catholic school. My parents made me go to Catholic school, but this is how I thought back then. I was completely ignorant. I didn't realize what they had to go through and what would happen to them for not saying, yes, I'm not a part of these people anymore. I'm a part of the people you want me to be. I'm forced to be Catholic. I'm forced to be Protestant. I'm forced to be Anglican, or whatever else was accepted by the white man. Or the European or whatever. But I can kind of understand why, to a certain degree, in a lot of places in Canada, there's this division between Caucasian or European, or should I say, a division between those that are First Nation and those that are not. There's like this, a lot of times there's like this hate in between them, and I could never understand why. I mean, like, I know that there was a time that the European settlers came over, and they took a bit of land, and then they took a little bit more, and I knew that there was some atrocities made, but I never realized that it actually goes a hell of a lot more deeper than that. It goes to a point where not only is it recent that a lot of people that are my age and a little bit older suffered these atrocities, but there's been no closure. So you have, people that in my generation, or the generation before me, or a generation before that, who are still around, that suffered such vile atrocities that it was never recognized. There was no closure made. It was, it stopped, but it was like, okay, shh, it's like it didn't happen. And, how could people not carry this hate inside for a certain religion or certain people that did this. So, I thought it'd be important to bring it up because I just think that it's every Canadian's duty to know our history, to know where we came from and where we're going and what the relations are between people. And I think that the most important thing for us to understand is that there is this gap between First Nations and the European settlers, the Canadians after. And, and for the most part, there are some things that are good, but there's still like this gap between the two. And I think that we need to understand, and in order for us to understand, we need to be accountable and we need to know what was done. So I think it's very important for us to take that into consideration and for us to learn that this is what happened and this is what we got to do. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, and hopefully this gets people to say, okay, well, you know what, I didn't know about this, maybe I should look into the subject. And I'm going to end up writing a really good column with some valuable information and dates and stuff so that people know. I just wanted to put a small little video piece together, and yesterday was Canada Day, so I didn't want to do anything. But today's video, I just wanted to say, hey, you know what? Not everything about Canada's history is great. We do come from a great country. I do love it here, but I think it's understand for us to know our history and know where we're coming from, and for us, for our people to be accountable for their actions. And that's going to be the only way for us to bridge the gap and move forward. So on that note, we should just know our history. Thanks a lot. If there's any questions or concerns, you can contact me at Robbie at un-educatedphilosopher.com. It's always great to hear from you. Site's growing a lot, and just keep it coming. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.